Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Children, today we are going to begin with our term 2. The first lesson that we will do is the jester and the king. For many years, Matinko had been the jester of King Jan, entertaining the king and his court with jokes, tricks, and funny faces. But now Matinko was growing old, and people no longer laughed at his jokes. Finally, King Jan decided that he must get a new court jester. He called Matinko and said, "The queen and I are very sorry, Matinko, but you are getting old. It is time for you to retire. Take this purse of gold and go and live peacefully in your little cottage." Children, it's a very interesting story that we are reading. Let's review this paragraph. Matinko, who was Matinko? He was a jester of King Jan. And what was the job that he was doing? His job was to make people laugh by his jokes, his tricks, and making funny faces. A time came, he was getting old, and people had stopped laughing at his jokes. So the king calls Matinko and tells him that the queen and the king are very sorry that they cannot carry on with him getting along. He's getting old, so they will not be able to keep him any longer. And it was time for him to retire. What do you mean by retire? When you complete your duration of job and become old, people retire. They are no longer fit to work. So at the time of departure, the king also gave him purse. Here does not mean a bag. It's a small pouch, or you can say they gave him a couple of gold coins and asked him to live peacefully in his little cottage. All right. Matinko was heartbroken. What do you mean by heartbroken? He became very sad. Sadly, he and his wife Wanda went to live in their humble cottage. What do you mean by humble? A simple cottage. Soon they had almost no money left. How can I earn a living? Wondered Matinko. Actually, the money that was given to them by king had finished because they were spending little by little, and a time came when the entire money had finished. And he was wondering how will he be able to live now or earn his bread. He looked for work in the village, but the only jobs to be had were sweeping floors, digging ditches, or collecting potatoes, and his health was too bad to allow him to do any of these. Now you see, when a man becomes old, a person's health does not allow him to do much work or any work at all. So Matinko, because of his age, he had become weak and he could no longer do very heavy work like sweeping the floor or digging ditches or collecting potatoes. All these were hard tasks, hard jobs. At last, the two old people were starving. Naturally, when all their money had finished, they had no money to buy bread for themselves or any food item. So they started to starve. Starve yahan kya hai? When you have no food to eat, then you starve. Then suddenly, Matinko had an idea. Wait, there is just one chance that we may not have to starve. Wanda, my good wife, trust me and do just as I tell you. Then Matinko explained his plan to her. Now you see, when there was no money, all he could do, he started to think of an idea how to solve his problem. So he told his wife that I have a plan which I'm going to tell you how to earn our not money but food. How will we be able to live? That very evening, Wanda chopped a raw onion. What do you mean by raw? Kacha, right? Something which is not ripe. Raw onion so that tears ran down her wrinkled cheeks. Why we call it wrinkled? Because she was old. Her face was wrinkled. And what she did was cut an onion. I'm sure you must have cut an onion or seen your mother cutting an onion. See how tears start rolling down the cheeks. Similarly, Wanda, when she cut the onion, her face, wrinkled face, was covered with tears. Then she went on to the palace to see the queen. Your Majesty, Wanda sobbed. Sobbed means cried. My poor Matinko is dead. The queen felt very sorry indeed for the poor old woman and gave her a purse full of gold coins to pay for the funeral. That is the last ceremony that one does for the departing soul, for the person who dies. All the things that we do, all the ceremonies that we do, that's known as funeral. And to buy food for herself. Still sobbing, that is still crying, Wanda thanked the good queen and came home. We have 50 gold pieces, cried Matinko in delight. The first thing the next day that Matinko did was to chop a raw onion and go to see the king. What did Matinko do? He did the same thing which his wife had done. He cut a raw onion, and when tears started rolling down his cheeks, he went to the king and addressed him. Your Majesty, he sobbed, my poor old wife is dead. The king felt sorry for him and gave him a purse of gold before sending him home. Children, you can, if you look at your previous page, 132, you can see the small bag kind structure. This is what being termed as purse. A kind of a bag, a small pouch, whatever you may call it, that he got, when she went, she got 50 gold pieces. Now when Matinko went, he also got a purse of gold pieces. Hurrah! Cried Matinko when he reached home and counted out 200 gold pieces from the king's purse. Now we have a little fortune. That means we have a lot of money now. Then he set out to complete the rest of his plan. He started to. On the sideboard in their little cottage, he set 2 big lighted funeral candles. And beside them he laid the 2 purses with all the gold pieces still in them. Then he told Wanda to lie down on the floor, cross your arms over your chest, and don't move. You must pretend to be dead, he told her. He covered her from head to foot with a white sheet. Then he lay down beside her, covered himself with another white sheet, and crossed his arms over his chest. And so they lay and waited. Now, let's review this part of the lesson. What was the second plan that Matinko had in his mind? He wanted to show a picture of 2 dead bodies. For that, he pretended he was dead, his wife was dead, and wanted to asked his wife and he himself. They both crossed their arms over their chest, as it is in Christianity. When the dead is ready to be buried, they put their hands on their chest. So he does that, and pretends as if the two dead bodies are lying side by side. In the meantime, as soon as Matinko had left the palace with the purse of coins, the king hurried to his wife's bedroom, to tell her that the old jester's wife had died. "But, my dear, you must be mistaken," said the queen. "It is the jester, not the jester's wife, who's dead." Then they began to quarrel, fight, or argue as to which of them was right. "Let us go and see who is dead," suggested the queen at last. So they ordered their carriage and drove to the jester's cottage. When they knocked and walked into the little cottage, they found the candles lit, their purses on the sideboard, and the two old people covered with white sheets. Obviously, Matinko and Wanda were both dead. "But which of them died first?" asked the queen. "It must have been Matinko." "No, it must have been Wanda," said the king. They began to quarrel again, when Matinko jumped up from under his sheet and said, "Your Majesty, my wife died first, but I was dead before her." "You old rascal," laughed the king and the queen at the same time, too glad to find the old couple still alive to be really angry. So actually, if it had been some ordinary occasion, maybe both king and queen would have gotten angry, but they didn't get angry. They laughed at the funny situation and how Matinko was trying to create a scene of dead bodies. So they started to laugh. When they tearfully explained that they had pretended to be dead because they had been starving, the king and the queen felt very ashamed. First, they were very happy to see both of them alive. They didn't get angry, but they laughed. But the very next moment, when Matinko told them why he had to do this, why did he create this scene? Because they were starving, they had no money to buy food, and they had no other way to do anything, and he was too old to work also. The king and the queen felt very bad about it, because they had sent him home, and they were kind of feeling ashamed that they had sent him for retirement. They promised to send money to Matinko and Wanda whenever they needed it. The old jester and his wife lived comfortably for many years. Every now and then, Matinko used to say happily to Wanda, "You see, my dear, even an old jester can sometimes play a clever trick." So, every now and then means from time to time. After some time, Matinko used to say very happily to his wife that see how an old jester could still play some tricks.